Hello, I am Adol from South Africa. I'm currently doing my PhD in religious studies in the University of Göttingen in Germany. I'm often asked how it is that I came about doing a PhD about pipe smoking. While I was doing my master's in intercultural theology, I came across a little master's thesis entitled Toward a Theology of Pipe Smoking. I presented this to some professors and we discussed the importance of a religious studies perspective of pipe smoking. Luckily, both of my supervisors are pipe smokers, and they suggested to focus on the religious significance of pipe smoking for a PhD. All around the world, different elements of smoking gained religious connotations. Tobacco as the source and valuable sacrifice, smoke as a representation of the rising prayer, and the pipe as an altar and tool of transformation. For many ethnic groups of southern Africa, the Zulu, Sotho, Tswana, Xhosa, etc., the tobacco pipe became not simply a furnace for burning tobacco, but an instrument of meditation and a tool for inviting the ancestors into our spiritual realm. For this reason, the tobacco pipe is seen as a material manifestation of worship and can be described as a portable altar, a microcosm of the universe itself. My research is focused on the smoking practices in history and modern practices of the Xhosa people of South Africa. Tobacco growing and pipe smoking was an integral part of daily and religious life in the second half of the 20th century. Nowadays, the attitude towards smoking is ambivalent and seriously challenged by the anti-smoking campaign and the often negative evaluation of tobacco consumption within Christian churches. My research is a result of fieldwork done in South Africa among contemporary Xhosa, and it focuses on the attitude towards pipe smoking, cigarette smoking, snuffing, general tobacco use, with an emphasis on pipe smoking. I look at the Xhosa and traditional healers who widely use tobacco and pipes for sacrifices and as means to communicate with the ancestors. My analysis focuses on the guiding question: what is it exactly that gives religious validity to the act of pipe smoking, and why is it that pipe smoking seems to be charged with religious meaning and potential? This question of validity opens up further questions such as what functions, both practically and religiously, does the pipe provide? Also, what relationship exists between the elements of the ritual, the tobacco, the pipe, and smoke? Moreover, how smoking practices overcome the changes in the lifestyle when people move from rural areas to more urban industrial areas. How is the production of tobacco affected when moving from a homegrown kind of tobacco to using international brands? And how are the beliefs affected from more traditional local tribal beliefs to influence of Protestantism and Christianity, and then of course a hybrid between tribal Xhosa beliefs and Christian Protestant beliefs? I suggest the hypothesis that sacrificial pipe smoking is rooted in its communicative, hierarchical, and biological functions, which makes smoking not only a leisure activity, but also enables ancestral appeasement, marking of social status, and hunger suppression in times of drought and famine. The significance of this project for religious studies is in developing a proper methodological complex to approach smoking and its transformation in different religions of the contemporary world. I attempt to analyze the validation of smoking practices in society, which can contribute to our deeper understanding of the mechanism of social acceptance of potentially risky activities. I see how my research can contribute to the discussion about harmful traditional practices, which is a crucial challenge for public health and human rights initiatives. Therefore, I see this research not only as a scientific inquiry, but a relevant material for a better understanding of religious processes and their role in choice making, coping, and security construction in South Africa and global society. For this talk, I would like to introduce the historical smoking practices of the Xhosa. They are made up about 8 million people spread throughout South Africa, but they predominate in the Eastern Cape. They are formed by many subgroups and come from the Bantu Nguni migration, which started in the Great Lake area and settled in the Cape. In the Cape, they were confronted with the Khoi and San groups, and these groups have a lot of click sounds in their language, which influenced Xhosa language as well. The Afrikaans track Boers also started to migrate out of the Cape in the early 18th century, where they encountered the Xhosa. The Xhosa were also being pushed from the Zulu kingdom, which was expanding to the north of them. And some of the Zulu tribes were integrated into the Xhosa tribes. They still hold some of their traditional Zulu practices, but they speak Xhosa language and identify themselves as the Xhosa. This means that during this time, the Xhosa were being influenced by the Khoi and the San and Zulu from the north, and at the same time, the European settlers were bringing new technology and a new religion, Christianity. The Xhosa traditional religion is monotheistic, with a distant god, and therefore this god is not spoken to directly, but is only spoken to through mediaries, through ancestors. And it is believed that misfortune falls on those that do not respect the ancestors, and good things come to those that honor them. As a scholar of religion, the methods I apply in my study of Xhosa smoking are from religious studies and anthropology. I am to find out about the religion of the Xhosa. This means I'm not so much interested in theological evaluations about smoking among the Xhosa, but rather what religious significance smoking practices play in their everyday religion. The importance of religion profoundly affects the way a culture develops, their philosophy, society, politics, in some ways the economy, and the psychology of the people are all shaped by their religion. While there are many theories of what a religion is and how we can go about defining it, one major founding thinker in religious studies is Emil Durkheim, who argued that religion serves the function to establish social order, and this order is reinforced by ritual, which I will get to shortly. A very useful framework of defining, or at the very least analyzing what religion is, was drawn up by Ninian Smart, who looked at 7 approaches to analyze a religion. He looked at the doctrine, that is, the beliefs involved, the myths, how rituals are practiced, how practitioners experience the religion, the ethical concepts, social structures of leadership, and lastly, the material culture, that is, how objects take on spiritual meanings. In this brief presentation, I would focus on the aspects of ritual and material religion. For analyzing ritual, I draw on Van Gennep's rites of passage, since the tobacco pipe used to be present in most rites of passage among the Xhosa. It begins from birth. There was a ritual of inserting a blade of grass inside of the pipe. And the juices that accumulated inside of the pipe was then rubbed on the umbilical cord of a newborn baby. Arguably, the most important rite of passage is the rite of circumcision for men, after which they are presented with a pipe and are allowed to officially smoke for the first time. Likewise, women are only allowed to smoke after they have given birth, as this means they are in the right social state. They have the right social status of being allowed to smoke. And many photographs show women smoking very long pipes while breastfeeding. And the claim is that the length of the pipe keeps the ash and smoke away from the baby's face. In order to get married, another rite of passage, a bride price is set by the bride's father and is traditionally paid in heads of cattle. This requires a lot of negotiations between the families, which often they would have sat together and smoked to invite ancestors to bless the union. Funeral rites sometimes include burying the pipe with the deceased, but it was also common for the pipe to be given as inheritance to the children of the first wife, considering that traditional Xhosa family structures is one based on polygamy. And because of polygamy, one man would have many wives and many children and be the ruler of a very big family. When he dies and becomes an ancestor, all of those second, third, fourth wives and their children would become step brothers and sisters and form a big community. And that man would be a very powerful man, and as an ancestor would remain powerful. The Xhosa envisioned smoke as a communication with the ancestors and a plea for protection from bad spirits. Tobacco is often planted at the entrance of the kraal, and this serves to protect all the animals and people entering and leaving the compound. It's thought that it pleases the ancestors, which enjoy the tobacco, and at the same time it scares off any spirits that might harm the people. Eventually, tobacco usage became so common among the Xhosa that its usage serves as an identity marker. The pipe is very iconic of the Xhosa people up till today. And there are a couple of phrases and idioms in the Xhosa language which speak about tobacco. One idiom states, "He has laid down his pipe," which means he has died. This suggests that to be alive is to smoke. It is debatable if native South Africans smoked before the arrival of Europeans. But whether they did or not, the adoption of smoking tobacco and incorporating it into their religion happened swiftly. The second aspect that I want to look at is that of material religion. And I draw on the work of Bridget Mayer, who coined the term sensational forms, which are, as she states, relatively fixed modes of invoking and organizing access to the transcendental. The Xhosa pipes, here's an example, look somewhat similar to the Dutch clay pipes, but the shape is only the outwardly evidence of copying. Copying styles of the West, however, could be seen as an attempt at the development of the society and the way it managed itself and formed a structure of hierarchy. The act of smoking invokes and organizes access to the transcendental. In the earlier days, tobacco was smoked from the ground. A hole was made in the ground, one filled with water. A channel was made between the two, and tobacco was smoked through the earth. Or another form was to fill the horn of an animal with water and smoke tobacco through the horn. But in the colonial period, smoking was copying the Dutch and English clay pipes. The pipe serves as the medium, allowing for prayers to be transmitted. This phenomenon is entangled with the psychedelic effect of the type of tobacco used, especially among diviners who use Nicotiana rustica, which is much higher in nicotine. Today, store-bought tobacco is used for ceremonies, but it's believed that homegrown and wild tobacco are considered to be more powerful. The plant itself also gives access to the transcendental. The seed is scattered in a separate garden to that of other foods, and it is cultivated by older people with the idea that they are closer to the ancestors. Often tobacco was grown in a kraal where the head of the family died, thus making the very ground a sacred space, and at times referred to as the field of the spirits. As the plant grows, it also holds a spiritual power that it invites good spirits and wards off bad spirits. And the penultimate step would be the preparation of the tobacco, which in itself is a sensational form. The tobacco leaves are picked off the plant, rolled tightly in a grass mat, and left to ferment. The final step, and my favorite, is the smoking of the tobacco, which is done both by lay people and the diviners. The pipe used for smoking is made of a acacia caphra, and taboos exist about when this tree is meant to be cut down based on the phases of the moon. While smoking, the burning tobacco carries the thoughts of the smoker to the ancestors, which may be their grandfathers or kin of further lineage. There exist different styles of pipes. Here's an example of a pipe for men and a longer pipe for women. Both of these styles of pipes have a separate mouthpiece, which is a means of protection against any form of witchcraft. There is also a U-shaped pipe, which is used while riding a horse, as it will bounce up and down while riding a horse, while this will sit in the mouth. There also exists a hybrid type of pipe called the Mbeka Peshea. The mouthpiece is permanently glued on, and it has a angle. The literal translation of this pipe is the overseas pipe, with the idea that this angle is pointing over the seas, somewhat of an imported idea. Finally, there is a very long and thin pipe, often decorated with beads, indicating it belongs to a diviner, and because it belongs to diviners, it's difficult to acquire without becoming one. To continue with the methodology of Bridget Mayer, she states that media are involved in invoking divine power, and in a way they're made to disappear through established and authorized religious sensational forms that mark the media as genuine. In this way, media are authenticated as being part and parcel of the very transcendental. In other words, mediation itself is sacralized. To say this in another way, if one were to look at photos and read ethnographical reports of the Xhosa, they are quite often seen smoking a pipe. It became such a normal part of the culture, it was somehow expected, that one didn't pay particular attention to the pipe because it was such part and parcel of the practice. In light of my fieldwork, I observed that the tobacco pipe is used as a medium to access the transcendental. Due to many factors, one of which being the anti-smoking campaign, the traditional medium for ancestral communication, the tobacco pipe, has been critiqued as harmful to health. The tobacco pipe went from being an identity marker and a tool for ancestral communication to being regarded as a dangerous tool. When people were confronted with these critiques, the pipe did not take this route of disappearing, as Mayer explains it, but obnoxiously appearing with serious consequences. This, however, meant that both the pipe and the means of communication with the ancestor were relocated, if not abandoned. From interviews conducted, I was told that many people wear a pipe as a part of traditional Xhosa regalia, yet they do not smoke. However, traditional healers are called upon to smoke, to hear what the ancestors have to say, even if they don't smoke in their daily lives. What once was a common garden plant, used for protection in symbolic form and ancestral communication in the form of smoke, has become relocated to the secular sphere of smoking as a means of reducing stress. With so many factors counting against the pipe, it has declined in popularity as an appropriate medium for ancestral communication. In other words, the medium has been corrupted, and thus alternative methods need to be found in order to continue ancestral communication among the Xhosa. From the above examples, one can see how smoking practices were interwoven with the traditional Xhosa lifestyle and religion. It is present in the rites of passage, daily rituals performed in the community and at home. It is part of the healing rituals of diviners, and even among non-smokers, it is kept as part of the traditional regalia. Through the example of the Xhosa, it is clear that all parts of the smoking process have religious significance, from growing the plant at the entrance of the compound to protect the families, the carving of the pipe from a culturally significant tree, to the communal and individual smoking in attempting to communicate and appease the ancestors. I argue that smoking among the Xhosa remains a religious practice, even in cases when it is moved out of traditional rituals to the private sphere and everyday religion. Traditionally, smoking practices were done in ceremonies. I argue that even with newer technologies such as e-cigarettes, ancestral communication can still be done. I suggest that the sacrificial pipe smoking validates its significance based on its communicative, hierarchical, and biological functions, which enable ancestral appeasement, the marking of social status, and biologically helps for hunger suppression in times of drought and famine. Moreover, the validity of religious pipe smoking has aspects similar to the Western memento mori concept, but the health risks are taken with the aim to protect the family and the community on a greater scale, which puts Xhosa religious smoking in stark contrast to addictive-driven cigarette smoking. I further would argue that pipe smoking is the most spiritual form of tobacco consumption for the Xhosa, as it is more communicative and the pipe serves as an altar, whereas other forms of tobacco consumption are more individualistic and they do not leave an indication of veneration taking place. The shape of the pipe, as well as the manner of smoking, was under a strong influence of intercultural exchange. This interplay, however, did not reduce the religious value of smoking practices and the pipe as a ritual object for the Xhosa. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.